Evening, and welcome to the final episode of Underdogs, chapters 27 and 28. And yeah, this is where the first novel comes to an end. I won't spend too much time reminding you of what happened yesterday because, well, it's a massive spoiler if anyone's watching this and didn't get a chance to see the previous episode. You probably remember specifically what happened with Ewan and Charlie, and presumably you also remember what happened with Jack and Kate. But I can't remember if I even set a discussion question for today. I don't think I did. But yeah, any comments, questions, anything in general, hi Debbie, about the book? Or, in fact, no, yeah, you can talk to me about what, if anything, you're hoping to see in the sequel. Any predictions for the sequel, because those are always fun, especially when the sequel is quite unpredictable. I'll tell you a few tiny bits about it, keeping as spoiler-free as possible towards the end. But first off, of course, we've got to get through the final chapters. Can't think of anything else that needs saying, so here we go. Chapter 20. Oh, hi Maria. Chapter 27. Ewan launched himself down the stairwell without checking behind corners, not even trying to stem the blood that flowed from his open arm wound. His intellect told him there was still more to lose, but the rest of his mind disagreed. He found stairwell 42, burst through the door, and was greeted with the sound of a rattling chain echoing from the chamber above. "Told you it would be faster on the way down," came a voice he recognised as Jack's. Jack's alive, and he must be talking to Kate, thought Ewan. Only one underdog will be added to the memorial wall, for now at least. Ewan shielded himself against the wall as the metal pulley ground to a halt above floor Y. His friends swung the pulley to and fro until they could grab the side railings. Kate winced as she climbed over, her torso clearly in pain. Within half a minute, the three surviving underdogs were reunited at the bottom of the stairwell, although Ewan refused to be happy. What happened with the factory?" he asked, his voice dull and apathetic. "Gone," answered Jack. "Shannon's trick worked, and now it's burning. Seriously, mate, didn't feel like telling me then?" "We didn't want to use the radio," said Kate, "just in case Roth..." She fell silent. Ewan held up his and Charlie's radios in the same hand. Nobody in the stairwell was fluent with hints, but Ewan could see in their misery that they understood. "Ewan," gasped Kate, "I'm so sorry." Ewan's body flinched as her arm landed on his shoulder, and he rejected the oncoming hug. "He was our friend too. Look, just don't. Seriously, let's just get the hell home." Kate nodded, her eyes to the floor. Ewan turned and left the stairwell, and as he led the way, he found himself beginning to stop and look round corners again. "Hi, Amy." It was as if his friends reminded him of his responsibilities, like those boy racers who drove sensibly when their parents were in the car. "They must know we're using the same exit," said Jack as he ran. "What choice have we got?" The closer they got to the exit tunnel, the denser the clone patrols became. Thankfully, the underdogs had more than enough stolen rifles between them, and their ammunition was replenished with every soldier they killed. Within 15 minutes, they had arrived at the exit, with even more bullets than they had started with. Ewan hauled the door backwards, ignoring the pain of his podcopter wound, and unveiled the exit tunnel like a game show prize. Wordless, the trio began their final run. When his chest started to ache, Ewan reached into his combat clothes and retrieved the stack of papers from the officers' sector. He clenched the papers in his fist, hiding his hatred for them, wishing he could run upstairs again and shove them into the printer in exchange for his friend back. "Hi, Paul. Yep, no worries about being late. You've not missed much other than Kate and Jack reuniting with Ewan, and they fought their way back to the exit from the stairwell, and now they're trying to escape the Citadel." "Jack," Ewan muttered, "put these in the rucksack." "What did you find?" asked Jack as he took the papers and packed them away. "I know who Shannon is. Her whole story. I found the reports written about us too, and a few of Grant's plans." "Whoa, nice." Ewan wondered whether to shout at Jack for his optimism, but was distracted when their radios made garbled noises. He raced further down the tunnel until the interference turned into human words. "Calling teenagers," came the voice. "Teenagers, come in." "Alex?" asked Jack. "Where have you been?" Not far away, Alex answered. Spent the last 3 days getting bored in someone's house, but it sounds like I got the better deal. Are there still 4 of you? 3, snarled Ewan. The radio fell silent. Even Alex was lost for words. It was Charlie. Leave the shock for later, Ewan continued as the group accelerated. Can you tell us anything useful? Marshall and Pierce know where you're going. Tough crap, they're too late. They should have run faster. Yeah, well, Pierce was just mouthing off over the radio. He sent a specialist unit up the tunnel. And trust me, mate, it's pretty ugly. On top of that, there's 100 soldiers back at the water treatment plant, in case you get that far. A low rumble, unlike any sound Ewan had heard before, emanated from not far away. There was a warm glow up ahead, where the semi-cylindrical tunnel bent to the left. Whatever was glowing, it was about to come into view. Alex, said Ewan, raising his assault rifle, I kind of specialist. Shut up a second. I can get you out of there, but you have to do absolutely what I say. Understand? Shut up for a second. Ewan hesitated, and the rumble ahead dominated the silence. Every instinct in his brain told him to disobey. Alex had never seen New London. Alex hadn't watched Charlie die. Alex had no right to boss him around. Nobody told Ewan what to do. Understand? Alex repeated. It had been Ewan's whole life. Adults who couldn't empathise with him, believing they could tell him how to live anyway. Teachers ignoring all of his anxiety to suit their own purposes and pretending it was for his benefit. Making decisions for him without getting it. I don't know. He pressed the talk button on his radio, the words, "You shut up, Alex," forming on his lips. At the last moment, he changed his mind. For all Alex's faults, for all his lack of understanding, he was doing what he could. He was offering to help, even if his wording was bad. Just for once, Ewan told himself, stop letting the PDA make your decisions. You can fight harder than this. His mind went back to the conversation with Charlie in the bedroom back at Spitfire's Rise, and the Oakenfold Code. The problems are not the person. You have this problem, but you are not this problem. And if this kind of demand could still beat you, you'd have died back in the inner city. You've earned your way out. Ewan? Fine, let's hear it, he gasped. You're about to come up against something nasty. The specialist units will try to force you out through an emergency exit at the side. The snipers are waiting for you. Hi, Christian. Ewan closed his eyes. With the thought of snipers planted in his mind, he could almost feel their gun barrels aimed at the roof above, 2 feet from his head. All you need to do, Alex finished, is tell me when you reach an emergency exit, wait there, and burst out when I tell you it's safe. Can I trust you to do that? Ewan breathed an agreement, knowing he had little choice in the matter. The tunnel had grown warmer, and the low rumbles were followed by uncomfortable blasts of hot air. Hello, Joseph. Hello, Elia. He had predicted flamethrowers, and he was right. Around the curve in the shortened corridor, the specialist units were dressed in a uniform Ewan had never seen. Clad in fireproof red suits with both oxygen and propane tanks clamped around their backs, the 20-ish clones pointed their flamethrower nozzles towards their unprotected victims. The clones were not just angry, they were happy. Delighted grins adorned the face of the flamethrower unit, as if they felt pride in the upcoming murder of their enemies. Their onward march began. They were less than 50 metres away, and Ewan was scared. Nerves and anxiety were an everyday feeling for him and his friends, but being scared... Kate lifted her rifle, but Jack's hand battered it down. Don't, he shouted. You'll hit the canisters. The explosion will burn up all the oxygen for a mile. The front clone released a yellow belch of fire that flew like dragon's breath down the confines of the tunnel and snapped its flaming tongues just metres from Ewan's body. Sweat from his forehead trickled into his eyes, but he could still see the emergency exit, halfway between him and the flamethrowers. Fine, snarled Kate at his side. No canisters. Kate gritted her teeth and squeezed her trigger finger. She sprayed every gram of ammunition from her weapon, covered every square inch from one side of the corridor to the other, and rained bullets into the clones on the front rank. But her sights had been aimed an inch lower than usual, away from the explosive equipment. With thighs, knees and shins shredded by Kate's bullets, the front half of Grant's flamethrower units blocked the path of the others behind them. There were no screams, but their expressions of agony were clear enough. Their grins gone, the back rank knelt down to shelter their own legs, using their convulsing allies as shields. With the time they gave him, Ewan ran forwards and leapt sideways into the emergency exit, his hips smashing into the bar. The exit flew open, its heavy door a perfect shelter from sniper fire, and his foot landed on soil for the first time in half a week. The young blue of a morning sky poured into the tunnel, along with an infinite supply of fresh oxygen. "Alex, now!" Ewan screamed, as Jack railed his bullets into the propane tanks. "Hello, Josiah." Ewan could never have predicted the intensity of so many pressurized canisters exploding in such confined space. The next few moments did not register in his head. An enormous blast threw him off his feet. He landed somewhere, on something. His eyes opened just in time to see metallic ripples running the length of the tunnel, roaring alongside a distant vehicle checkpoints like a train passing through a station. "I am such a numpty," was the only thought that could pass through his dizzy head. The ringing began to fade in his ears, and he heard Kate screaming inside the tunnel. The phrase sensory overload would not go nearly far enough to describe how she must have felt. Jack was there too, apologising to her. There were uniformed clones running around the vehicle checkpoint. One of them was tall and black. He approached another figure. The figure approached another figure, who fell instantly to the ground as he passed, as if from a stab wound. "Alex." "Ewan!" yelled Jack. "Ewan, come back!" Ewan prepared to leap to his feet, as fast as his disoriented brain would let him, but changed his mind when he saw his surroundings. He had landed at least 5 metres from the safety of the exit door, with nothing around him but dried mud. The snipers could have fired 100 bullets into me, but they didn't. They must think I died in the explosion since I've not moved. I won't give them a reason to change their mind. He tried to breathe as shallowly as possible. Through telescopic sight, maybe the snipers would see him breathing. Jack was starting to panic inside the tunnel, beginning to believe his bullets had killed his strike team leader. But Ewan couldn't afford to call out to him, or even stick up a thumb. Did I hear "Young Blue of the Morning Sky"? At the distant checkpoint, Alex had seized an assault rifle from one of half a dozen dead clones. There was one more enemy standing, who had just thrown his stabbed colleague into the passenger side of the transport van. Alex did not shoot the last clone, instead letting him clamber into the driver's seat and speed off back towards the Citadel. "You guys all right in there?" came his voice in the radio. "Just get us the hell out of here!" yelled Kate. "Not yet. The snipers haven't forgotten you. Give me a second, and meet me at the brow of the hill when I shout. You'll want to listen to this." Ewan moved his eyes, the only part of him he dared to move, and found the van hurtling down the tarmac road to the vehicle entrance. It was going at 50 at least. Then a faint voice came from the radio. It was swamped in static, as if Alex were holding a clone's radio next to his own, so that the whole team could listen. "Hello, Sandy." "Soldier," came a nervous mutter. "This is Arnold Salter, Deployment Director for Vehicle Port 3. Your intent is unknown, please clarify." "Good morning, Mr. Salter," Alex began, in full performance mode. "On behalf of the British populace, may I present you with a token of our appreciation for your boss's hospitality." The distant van was pointed towards the vehicle port, accelerating towards its maximum speed. Ewan could only admire the driver's determination to save his wounded colleague, futile as it was. Then again, it was unlikely to be compassion. It must have been a tactical retreat. "Thanks for the explosives in the Floor X armoury," Alex's voice continued. "There were enough in there to fill the van I'm driving. There might even be enough for the explosion to reach the inner city and set the prisoners free, if I judged the run-up right." Alex turned his eyes back to the vehicle checkpoint and saw Alex's face poking out from behind the wall. Alex seemed to be a good liar, and Ewan hoped Arnold Salter would be stupid enough to believe him. Either way, Grant's employees couldn't afford to take risks. Somewhere close to the vehicle port, the van started to swerve. Perhaps the driver was reaching for his partner's radio to tip-tap his simplified Morse code and claim his innocence. He would not manage it. "This is for all my friends who sacrificed themselves in that tunnel explosion to distract you," Alex screamed. The quick-witted creativity made Ewan smile. "For those who died before them, for my family inside New London, and for every dead body you and your bosses are responsible for. Good morning and good night, Mr. Salter. I hope your death is more fiery than all the clones combined. At least they didn't choose their jobs." Ewan was expecting sniper bullets to rattle through the van as if from a machine gun. He had not predicted that a dozen rockets would soar from the battlements to the road, from launchers that must have been stationed there for large targets. The first wave of rockets formed craters in the ground where the speeding van had been moments earlier. "Ewan, go!" Alex screamed into the radio. "Now!" Clones were not stupid, but they were hopelessly robotic in their obedience. Messages had been relayed. Snipers had reassessed their main targets. Each one had calculated the van of fictional explosives to be the bigger priority, and had each made the same choice to withdraw their focus from the tunnel. Ewan leapt to his feet, and nobody shot him. He called back to a surprised Jack and an exhausted Kate, yelling for them to follow him outside. A second wave of rockets was fired towards the distant van as the underdogs made a break for freedom, and Ewan glanced to his right as one rocket hit the van straight on its bumper. At 5 o'clock in the morning on day 4, the underdogs' longest and most arduous mission of all time ended with one final explosion. Within half a minute, Ewan, Kate and Jack had reached the safe side of the hill without a shot fired towards them. That's chapter 27, one chapter remaining. Debbie says, can't wait to read the next book, Underdogs 2. Yep, thank you very much. I can't wait for it to come out. It's something like a month away. The thing is, the official release date is the 30th of May, although release dates actually mean a lot less than you think. It doesn't really have any practical impact on when most people get them. It's just kind of a placeholder. It's just legally books need to have an official release date, and they chose 30th of May. Practically speaking, everyone who has pre-ordered the sequel will probably get it around the start of May, because that's what happened last time. In fact, if you've pre-ordered the physical book, you've also pre-ordered a copy of the digital copy, so you'll have access to the digital version before, well, several days before the physical one even reaches you. Hello, Eve, by the way, and hello, Paul. Just in time to listen to the very final chapter of the first Underdogs book. And without further ado, here we go. Chapter 28. Raj's chess skills had evaporated since Kate had said goodbye. He was still destroying Simon, but it was no consolation. Next to the game, Thomas rested the tip of his nose against the coffee table, crossing his eyes in boredom. Simon had never been a chess expert, although to his credit he had learned how most of the pieces moved. But that morning he had stopped trying to win from move 1. He had not been the same since he had returned from the health centre, and finally accepted that his friends were probably dead. Thomas had sulked too, but over the following days he seemed to have changed for the better. He had started to smile and had stopped crying, although neither seemed genuine. Perhaps he's remembered that losing his mum was tougher, thought Raj, and so was takeover day. Or perhaps he's just being him and trying to cheer everyone else up. Raj was 3 moves from checkmate when Simon resigned. His friend did not knock over his king, he just started to pack away his pieces. The life had drained from Simon in recent days, and Raj racked his brains for words of encouragement. About 10 minutes longer than usual, that was. Simon didn't even respond. Raj opened his mouth for another try, but Thomas leapt up and started to make shrill noises. Raj had not even noticed the opening door, but McCormick had entered the living room with Gracie hiding behind him. That meant the comms unit was empty, so for better or worse, the mission was over. "McCormick!" Thomas shrieked. At the mention of his name, Lorraine ran in from the kitchen, and Mark followed with vague interest. There was a silence of anticipation as their leader stood before them, worn and exhausted, but somehow looking rejuvenated. Please, God, let him be smiling for a real reason. Please don't let him be faking it for us like Thomas does. "Ladies and gentlemen," McCormick announced, "I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news first, of course." Raj took a deep breath that mirrored McCormick's. "It is my sad duty to confirm the loss of one of our friends," McCormick started, with a voice which balanced his leadership tone with his personal grief. "I have to report the death of Charlie, who gave his very, very best to the mission at the expense of his own life." Raj gritted his teeth. It was never easy when McCormick announced a death, but the worst part was the guilt, because every time a casualty was mentioned by name, Raj felt terrible for his relief that the name wasn't Kate's. But why is he only confirming one death? "We had the pleasure of Charlie's company for 11 months, McCormick continued, "and we came to know his colourful character very deeply. And I know this group well enough to believe we'll remember his enthusiasm, determination and diligence before we remember the challenges he arrived here with. More than anything else, we can remember him in the knowledge that he died protecting a friend. Ewan promises me that was the very last thing he did." "You spoke to Ewan?" asked Lorraine. "Yes, which leads me to the good news. Don't be afraid of the sudden mood change, my friends. Charlie would have wanted it." McCormick's fist rapped against the door, and on cue, the handle turned. The room sprung into rapturous cheering and applause as the impossible happened. Ewan, Kate, Jack and Alex, entered the living room, arms held high and victory grins plastered from ear to ear. The dead had returned to life, the war was no longer lost, and Raj laid eyes on Kate for the first time in half a week. Amidst the cheering, whooping, hugs of reunion, and joy that could only come from close friends being reunited against the odds, Jack raised his hand in an attempt to quell the atmosphere. "Guys," he began, as Raj shed a happy tear, "that's not even the good bit. The clone factory has been destroyed." Raj had been to FA Cup finals that did not match the passion and ecstasy in his friend's roars. He leapt to his feet, made his way across the room, and wrapped his arms around the best girlfriend in the world. Kate surprised him with a kiss, appearing to no longer care who knew about their relationship. Thomas was laughing for real again. The smile had returned to Simon's face. Ewan could be seen in the kitchen. Lorraine could be seen in the kitchen, gathering glasses for celebratory toast. Even Mark was shaking hands with his colleagues, the underdogs who had dived into hell and come back smiling. Except Ewan, Raj noticed. The strike team leader leaned himself against the doorframe with his arms folded, wearing a fake smile on his lips that didn't match the rest of his face. He drank the contents of the glass as soon as it was given to him, then skulked out of the room, tapping McCormick's shoulder along the way. Raj knew better than to follow. Ewan reached the memorial wall half a minute before McCormick, and went through the major points in his head one last time. The underdog's leader followed him into the cellar, with a predictable smile of sympathy on his face. "I've asked Lorraine to set up the clinic," he started. "If you don't get that arm seen too quickly, you might lose it. I need to know whether we're safe," Ewan said. "Pardon?" "Grant's known our names for almost a month. It's only a matter of time before he searches our old houses and finds us in yours. If we're in danger, the others deserve to know." McCormick lifted his eyes and checked every corner of the room. With nobody listening, he spoke softly. This may be my home, Ewan," he said, "but it's not my house. Not technically, anyway." Ewan was not in the mood for a coded, non-literal conversation. He needed a clear and specific answer, and he needed it right then. Where are we really?" he asked. "Polly Jones's house?" "Polly." Ewan's eyes drifted to the top of the memorial wall. "Maybe her name should have... After Barbara died," McCormick continued, "I almost lost everything. Up here, I mean." He pointed to the side of his head with a delicate finger. "I was alone up in Durham. I quit my university post for mental health reasons, and withdrew a little further from civilization each day. And then came Polly. She knew you when you were kids, right?" "She knew Barbara, yes. She called me a few months after the funeral to see how I was coping." There were little ripples in the tone of McCormick's voice, and Ewan was unsure how to react. He wasn't used to real adults trusting him with emotionally charged information. "I emptied everything during that phone call. All my sadness, my frustration, my anger towards the world and everything in it. And she took me in. She invited me down to London, transported my things, and let me live with her. Barbara may have been the woman who turned me into a man, but Polly was the reason I survived after she was gone." "So this was her house all along?" asked Ewan, his heartbeat steadying. "Not yours?" "Well, legally, yes. I lived here, but officially I was just a guest staying for a very long time. And in that time she found me a therapist, helped me get a job at Greenwich University, and pushed my life back in the right direction. But on takeover day..." "Yeah," interrupted Ewan in a bitter voice. "I know. If anyone's actually worked out what is actually not being said here, then well done for working it out. It's explained explicitly in later books, but it's an unspoken truth I'm wondering if people will work out right now." He shook his head, emptying his brain of thoughts like a mental sieve. "As sad as it sounds," McCormick continued, "there's no written evidence Polly and I were ever friends. But on the plus side, that's why we'll never be found here. That and the thermal blocker keeping our body heat off their scans. Yes, I thank your father's soul for that every day. But we're safe here, Ewan, and that's the end of it. If Grant knew about my connection to Polly, he'd have flattened this place long ago." The answer satisfied Ewan, but he didn't budge. "Dana says she's clueless. That's completely fine. I'm kind of hoping that people remain clueless until it's spelled out in... I think it's Underdogs 3 where it's first explicitly said, but there are clues there." "What else is there, Ewan?" "Charlie." "You don't have to talk about this now," said McCormick. "Give yourself time if you need it. I'm not going anywhere." Ewan clawed a hand against the memorial wall, and his breaths quickened. He had done his hero duty for the day, and his vulnerable side crept back into his head. "He died too early," he gasped. "It's not right. We weren't done with him yet." "I think I see what you mean. We were shaping him into the person he'd always wanted to be. He was overcoming new things every day. Another few months and he'd have been everything he wanted. But even after everything we did, he still ended up dead. It's like all our efforts were for nothing. And I can't help but feel, what about the others? There's only 11 of us left, or 12 including Shannon. Are we wasting our time with them too? Is it really worth helping people if they don't even live to..." Ewan coughed as the cellar's dust lodged in the back of his throat. He abandoned the rest of his sentence and let McCormick respond. "It is absolutely worth helping them, Ewan, whether they live or not. Barbara and I donated every month to the Waking Dreams Foundation for children with terminal illnesses. Was their work worth it, do you think?" "Yeah. Honourable, anyway." "Polly volunteered at a hospice that looked after the elderly in their final days. You'd have never convinced her it was all for nothing." Ewan found the old man's hand resting on his shoulder, and he allowed it to stay. "Ewan, if you think of life advice as something that leads to an ultimate result, you'll never know when you get there. When someone dies, you won't be able to see how much you helped them. You'll just be left bitter about not doing enough. But it's not the finishing point that matters." "Then what does?" "Making the right differences at the right time. Simon's been a project of mine ever since we met. We helped Thomas recover after Beth died. And earlier this week, we were blessed with another person to build up. Even if we never completed our work with Charlie, we transformed him from the boy he used to be. More importantly, what we did for him stuck in his heart. He spent his final days as the best person he had ever been. And that mattered." Ewan opened his mouth, closed it again, half opened, and then spoke. "Thank you. Feeling better?" "Maybe one day." Ewan turned, and McCormick's hand left his shoulder. He caught sight of the memorial wall, and pictured the name of Charlie Coleman chiselled into the rock. It would only be a matter of time. "You're the perfect example of a changed man, Ewan," said McCormick. "When I compared the vicious boy who came here on "Could you please stop mentioning Takeover Day?" gasped Ewan. "I know what kind of guy I was, and I know what it did." "And none of it matters," McCormick answered, "because that Ewan West no longer exists. You came out of the other side, and you should be proud of it." Ewan wiped the first tears from his eyes. McCormick was right, as always, and just as Ewan had once said to Charlie, it was time to stop letting his past control his future. "Come on, my friend," said McCormick with his warmest smile. "Let's get you to the clinic." Okay, final scene, with 4 pages left. "You're a lucky sod, Ewan," said Lorraine as they walked up the stairs together. "It's never luck," he snarled. "Just so you know how serious this is, we've got Kate and Alex with gunshot wounds, and I'm still treating you first. You're looking at septicemia if we leave that wound much longer. Have you got the medicine or not?" "Yes, and enough to heal you if you do exactly what I say. None of your defiant attitude, okay?" It's called pathological demand avoidance, thought Ewan. But nobody here knows except Kate and Jack. And it's staying that way. I escaped with personnel files for each of us. But what a pity mine just happened to get destroyed on the way home. "I've left the correct dosage on the bedside table," Lorraine finished. "Take it, then meet me in the kitchen. That wound needs washing, and I'm boiling some water clean. I could have done it before you'd arrived if anyone had let me know you were coming." Ewan smirked. He had barely been home half an hour, and Lorraine's delight had already turned into uncompromising bossiness. It was the Lorraine he knew and appreciated. She led him into the clinic and headed back downstairs. Ewan looked at the bedside table and found the mug with his pills. On the bed, Shannon looked surprised to see him. "Yeah, I'm alive," Ewan muttered. "Great to see you too." Shannon maintained her stare, but showed no emotion. Given what he had learned about her, Ewan didn't mind. She had probably spent her whole life internalising her feelings. "Your memory stick worked." For that moment at least, the internalising stopped. Shannon's eyes lit up, and she grinned. "I didn't see it myself," Ewan continued, "so I can't tell you how good it looked." Shannon rolled her eyes and gave no further response. Ewan swallowed the pills and sat himself on the other end of the bed. Lorraine could wait. "I know you've kept your end of the deal," he said, "and we'll keep ours. But don't think our work's done. I've got an army down there who think the war's already won. That all we need to do is wait for a few months for the last clones to age themselves to death. But there are other citadels, and they all have clone factories too. And they've got loads of transport vehicles as well. We slowed them down, not stopped them. Again, Shannon didn't answer. Fine, Ewan snarled. Be silent if you bloody want. My best friend died this morning because you wouldn't talk. She looked up at him with an expression that might have meant sympathy. Wait, Ewan said with a shake of his head. I'm sorry, that's not fair. I'd have taken him to the officer's sector anyway, even if we hadn't managed to research you. Even if we hadn't needed to research you. Suddenly, Shannon grew concerned. Her eyes widened, her jaw dropped open, and Ewan could hear her quickening breaths. And yes, he said, you were easy enough to find. Your file was pretty much blank, but it said but I saw what it needed to. I thought Rose was your last name, not your middle name. You did well to silence Keith Tyler before he could finish his sentence. Shannon's hand moved towards her pocket, and Ewan noticed. Whatever sharp object you're hiding, don't bother. I've done enough fighting today and I just can't be asked. I'm telling you this because I want to know that nothing's going to change. The colour in Shannon's face lightened. Ewan spoke softly. You can't help being the daughter of Nicholas Grant, and you won't be judged for it. We're the guys who invented the Oakenfold Code. We know it's our choices that make us who we are, not just how we're born. And you chose to escape your father, get out of New London with Anthony Lambourne, and help bring him down on the outside. Shannon Rose Grant buried her head in her hands, then broke her silence. I saw a wow react there, so clearly there's at least one person watching who didn't see the twist coming. Yeah, feel free to comment, by the way, whether or not you actually predicted that Shannon was the daughter of Nicholas Grant. Shannon Rose Grant buried her head in her hands, then broke her silence. I didn't choose to escape, she whispered. We were forced to flee. There was a 5-second pause before Shannon's head lifted from her hands and stared at Ewan with watery eyes. My father knew who you were, thanks to your friend Daniel, she continued. Before we left, Anthony used thermal imaging to look for you. We found active bodies in a disused health centre and just assumed it was you. I even printed out the list of your names to show McCormick you were in danger. But when we got there, we found a completely different group who had no interest in fighting. They realised they were detectable and planned to pack up their things and evacuate up north. But my father found them the same way we did. Maybe a few days from now, he'll find you too. He won't, answered Ewan. Not if he's relying on thermal vision. Trust me. And Debbie says, wow, amazing twist. Thank you. I'm very, very glad that I managed to trick you as well. Shannon lifted her head, her face full of tears. So what happens now? She asked as Ewan rose to his feet. Right now, he said, walking to the door, I'm going to clean my arm, then have a drink for my dead friend. When everything calms down, I'll tell the others about you. Final page. And then they'll realise how useful you are. My rucksack's full of your father's plans, and you could be the key to stopping all of them. You've already struck a nice blow against him, Shannon. Might as well finish him off. Ewan opened the door to the hallway, and was halfway out before her voice stopped him. You're a good man, Ewan. He turned around, puzzled. What? I see the same look in your face as the one I grew up with, Shannon continued with a hint of a smile. The look people have when they believe they're defective or useless, when they're taught to believe it. It was Ewan's turn to be silent. You have every reason to hate me. Your friend's dead and I'm the daughter of the guy who made it happen. But instead, you sat next to me and told me nothing would change. It takes a special kind of strength to do that. The daughter of Nicholas Grant lay down on the bed, relaxed and at home in Spitfire's rise. You're not defective, Ewan, she continued. You're not broken. You're not the wrong kind of person. And don't let anyone in this world tell you otherwise. You and your friends are exactly who they're meant to be. Favourite quote of the whole book, right at the end. Ewan could not bring himself to smile, but he took the time to reply. The world's about to see who we really are, he finished, before closing the clinic door and heading downstairs to celebrate Charlie's birthday. And that's it. That's the end of book 1. So, if you're watching this, then presumably you've watched the entire series all the way through, and I'd like to say thank you very much for following this. And in these days of being locked down, I really hope that this... Oh, Heart React's coming in, thank you. I really hope that listening to this has helped. And Julie's left comments as well. Oh, wait, what did I do? I think did I just delete something, or... Oh, no, never mind. Looks like I pinned it by accident. Anyway, can I just say a huge thank you to Chris for reading Underdogs to us all during isolation, for taking a piece of his day to come here for us. Can't speak for everyone, but for me it has made the uncertain and strange days a lot easier to get through, seeing a familiar face and listening to a story I love. Oh, thank you. I look forward to Underdogs 2 being released. Thank you, Chris, for brightening our days. Sarah says, yes, thank you, Chris. These live streams have put some much needed structure into my days, even if just for a short time. Thank you so much. Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you. Dane says, no, every day was too much. Couldn't keep up. Yep, not everyone can. No shame in that. And one thing I'm very grateful for is the fact that even though these are live videos, Facebook does save them. So there could be people in a month's time watching these videos, or people who have already watched them watching through them again. Paul says, brilliant. Thanks much for reading. Thanks very much for reading for us. You're more than welcome. And thank you very much for following and commenting and engaging with it all. I'm really grateful for that. Now, there is, by the way, in the back of the book, well, first off, there's the advert page for the sequel. Julie, could you do me a favour and post the link to where you can pre-order the sequel, please? Because as I've said over the last few days, Unbound have extended the deadline for getting your name printed in the book as a supporter. And hello, Martin. Hello, Tom. We've just finished the book, but you're welcome to go back to the start of the video and keep watching. But what I'm also about to do is offer people the option of staying and listening to the prologue of book 2, because that is also printed in the back of Underdogs 1. The version that I've got is the pre-edited version, where the whole thing's from Ian Marshall's perspective. What I have on my computer is the one that's actually going to be in the printed copies of Underdogs 2, which is rewritten from Oliver Roth's perspective. So if you want, I can read out the prologue to book 2, just to whet your appetite and see what's the basic plot of Underdogs Tooth and Nail is going to be. Thank you, Julie, for posting the link. I'm going to pick that one. So besides that, wondering what else there is to say. All of the relevant links I've just noticed in the description for this video. All of the links are there for Underdog's Facebook page. Please do follow that if you're interested in where the series is going from here, where you can get physical copies, audio copies, Kindle copies of the original Underdogs, and of course the pre-order link for the sequel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start reading out the prologue of the sequel. For those who don't want to hang around for it, that's completely fine. I'll say goodbye to you now and thank you very much for following. I really hope that this has added something to your evenings for the last 2 weeks. For those who want to stick around, I'm going to start reading in about 30 seconds. Okay, here we go. So what we have here on my computer is the fully edited version of Underdogs 2. Dare says mornings. Yep. Thank you very much, especially to the people who've watched these videos, even if they're outside of so-called sociable hours or whatever. And going down, there's a bit about the author, and also the dedication is to the memory of my adopted godparents, Ted and Mary Ward, Ted being my Boys Brigade captain and Mary being his wife, who taught an autistic child how to lead people, and to my adopted godson Morgan, who I am eternally proud of. He turned 16 a few days ago. Wow, he's like almost an adult now, and he's come on so much. Anyway, so it starts off with the Underdogs of Spitfire's rise as of May 16th, year 1. So this takes place a month after the original Underdogs, and that's not a spoiler. It literally says that in the prologue that's printed in the original book. And this is a list of everyone's names. Sadly, Charlie's name crossed out. Shannon's name's been handwritten in, and a bit about the villains as well. So the prologue is basically in 2 halves. There's the first bit with Oliver Roth typing stuff on a computer, which basically covers the beginning, but covers the events of the first one, and then it goes into the meat, so to speak, almost literally, but I won't give anything else away, of what the sequel is about. So I'm going to read the prologue. For those who don't want to watch, take care. Thanks very much for following, but here it is. Oliver Roth never felt like words on a screen did him justice. He sat at his workstation, browsing the Clone Factory incident report, and wished it had been written with a little more flair, with him being recognised as more heroic. He had earned it. Happy birthday to your son, Paul. He grabbed his last slice of pizza and ate it in 2 mouthfuls. Life in New London's upper floors, with literally only 3 people in the country who outranked him, came with its fair share of luxuries. Among them was the opportunity for pizza on demand, even for breakfast. Yes, as a growing lad and a professional assassin, healthy eating was important, but only when his bosses weren't looking. Besides, they'd forced a 14-year-old out of his bed at 6:30 in the morning, so him eating pizza for breakfast was their fault, really. Executive Summary Report. New London Clone Factory Destruction. Roth huffed. Nicholas Grant, dictator and master of Great Britain, had chosen such a stale and wooden title for such an exciting few days. Updates in progress, May 16th, Year 1. By the way, when I do that voice, it basically means it's written in Korean New, and that's basically reading the words on Oliver Roth's screen. On April 23rd, Shannon Grant fled New London with her associate, Lieutenant Anthony Lambourne, deceased. They hid in a disused NHS health centre with a small group of takeover day escapees. They were found and killed by Keith Tyler, deceased, within 24 hours, with the exception of Shannon. As commanded by Nicholas Grant, Shannon was transported by Tyler back towards New London. However, she was able to kill him and escape. Wow, Nick, could you have made this sound any more boring? This is your estranged daughter you're writing about. But Roth smiled. That was the great thing about being asked to proofread. He could make whatever edits he wanted. She was able to stab Tyler more than 50 times and leave him dead in somebody's back garden, the edited sentence said. Roth had never liked Tyler anyway. Smiling, he read on. Before their escape, Shannon and Lambourne produced a virus which would shut down and destroy New London's Clone Factory, which ultimately made its way into the hands of terrorist faction 001, known amongst themselves as the Underdogs. It is assumed that Shannon remains sheltered with them in their countryside hideout, which they have named Spitfire's Rise. Okay, let's make the next bits more interesting. The insurgents, crossed out Underdogs, invaded New London on April 25th, with a team comprised of Ewan West, Kate Arrowsmith, Jack Hopper, Alex Janelli, and Charlie Coleman, deceased. Their intention was to neutralise, crossed out, annihilate the Clone Factory, although they were forced to evacuate, crossed out, chased by Oliver Roth into the inner city prison, the exception being Alex Janelli, who was separated from his group. See also the Janelli Project. Oliver, came the gruff voice of Ian Marshall to his radio. Nearly done, calm yourself. He knew his tone would annoy his boss, but Marshall was the kind of man who deserved to be annoyed whenever possible. Anyone who would willingly choose to be New London's head of military division was never going to be a barrel of laughs. We're waiting for you in the experiment chamber right now. You don't want to miss the fireworks, do you? You perform that AME experiment without me and I'll break your pretty little jaw. Now wait a second. Marshall huffed and fell silent. Roth continued his edits. The insurgents, crossed out Underdogs, were able to utilise a weakness in the inner city walls, crossed out, utilise staff incompetence, and escaped the prison on the morning of April 28th. They were able to destroy the Clone Factory as planned, in addition to seizing intel on the AME project from an officer's sector, and escaped with Alex Janelli. The exception being Charlie Coleman, who was apprehended and killed, crossed out, shot repeatedly in the chest by Oliver Roth, bringing his underdog kill count to 8 of the morons. Roth smiled. It was an improvement at the very least. He read the final paragraph as he rose to his feet. To date, the surviving underdogs remain at Spitfire's Rise. They are assumed to be planning their next move against the AME project. As a result of their raid, research regarding AME has been sped up dramatically. Talking of AME, it was time for those fireworks. Roth jogged towards the door. Grant, Marshall and Pierce would wait for him even if he walked, but he couldn't wait to see the experiment for himself. Hi, Cassandra. With a swipe of his keycard and the flicker of a green LED, Oliver Roth was granted access to the experiment chamber. The teenage assassin found himself in the same room as Ian Marshall, New London's head of military, and Nathaniel Pierce, its chief of scientific research. Only Grant himself was missing. "Evening, Oliver," said Nathaniel Pierce with shallow sarcasm. It was barely 7 in the morning, but Pierce took every opportunity to point out his colleague's faults, including lateness. Roth smirked and said nothing. Part of being fearsome meant knowing when not to step into arguments. "Is the subject ready?" Roth asked, spotting the figure behind the glass. "He doesn't look it," replied Pierce, taking a sip of coffee from a mug which read, "Smart Arse and Proud of It," in big bold letters. "Not that it matters." Roth took a closer look at the clone inside the chamber. He may have been a manufactured collection of factory-grown flesh and organs, but the emotions on his face seemed very real. He showed signs of nervousness and suspicion, clueless as to why he was armed to the teeth with an assault rifle, holstered handguns, grenades, and a belt full of hunting knives. Especially since the experiment chamber around him was almost empty, hosting little more than a pair of stone pillars that stretched to the ceiling, positioned a metre apart in the centre of the room. Roth glanced to his left. Ian Marshall was predictably impatient, his hands in his pockets and his top lip beginning to quiver. Nathaniel Pierce wore his usual creepy smile, perhaps a little too entertained by his own work. "Are we nearly there yet?" Roth asked. "AME is 4 months ahead of schedule," Pierce replied. "You can wait another minute." "Don't say that like you're proud," Roth thought. "If it weren't for you and Wes stealing our plans from that officer sector, Nick wouldn't have made you speed up the research. McCormick and his special needs kids have had three weeks to plan their next move." Special needs kids. It may have been true, but Roth used the phrase to insult his enemies rather than underestimate them. Thanks to their efforts in April, New London's glorious clone factory had become a burnt-out ash pit which hadn't grown a soldier in 3 weeks. Those special needs kids were the reason why the ageing clone population was in steep decline, only propped up by imported soldiers from other citadels. The phone at the side of the desk rang, and Marshall picked up the handset. Without seeking permission, Roth pushed the speakerphone button to allow himself and Pierce into the discussion too. "Experiment chamber," Marshall said. "Ian," came a lively voice through the speakerphone. Dana got triggered there. Sorry that. Whatever it was, please let me know what it was so I can advise you on what if something else is happening again. And Debbie says Ray wants me to solve. I'll do that right at the end, yeah? In fact, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of Autist Not Weird existing, and the 5th anniversary of me coming out to everyone I knew and to the internet as being autistic. And I've asked people for their ideas on what to do to celebrate, and it seems by far the most popular answer is a Rubik's Cube tutorial. So that's what I'm going to do. Anyway. "Experiment chamber," Marshall said. "Ian," came a lively voice through the speakerphone. It was the voice of Nicholas Grant. "Morning, sir. Looks to me like you're ready. Commence the experiment, gentlemen. You're not coming down? Floor F's too low for me. The view on my screen is perfect." It was meant to be doing a great job. Oh, that's relief. Thank you. Thank you very much. And hello, Sherry. Roth leaned over the desk. "Hey, Nick," he said. "I bet you wish Shannon were here for this." "My daughter made her decisions," Grant answered. "Now she can live with them." Roth looked to his left. Pierce's face wore an entertained grin, and one corner of his lips perked at Grant's last sentence. Roth could not interpret what that particular grin meant, and Pierce did not elaborate. Roth had not spoken to Shannon during their time together in the Citadel. As far as he remembered, the girl had spent most of her days locked away in some far corner of Floor A like a fairy tale princess. Whether this was through her own choice or through her father's overprotection, Roth had never known. He just knew that Shannon Grant had been a private, neurotic failure of a person, and she was probably still her private, neurotic, failing self at Spitfire's Rise too. "Now, if you please," Grant finished. Roth brought his attention back to the experiment chamber and the clone who stood inside, and he remembered how excited he was to witness the proceedings about to take place. Pierce nodded and pushed a button. The CCTV cameras around them began to record. 8 minutes past 7, announced Pierce. May 16th, Year 1. Final phase of practical experimentation underway. Atmospheric metallurgic excitation, Research Trial 26, commencing. Marshall retrieved the radio from his belt and spoke to the clone behind the glass. "Soldier," he began, "move to the other end of the room, at jogging speed, passing between the pillars." Roth watched in amusement as the clone gave a frightened stare towards the shielded humans, perhaps trying to ask his superiors why. When none of them gave any reaction, the clone turned his head forward again. He knows his only option is obedience. Poor guy. The clone ran for about 10 metres, weighed down by his excessive array of weaponry, before passing between the two stone pillars. He didn't live long enough to notice what happened next. The slow-motion replay would later show the air rippling around him, as if he had run through a vertical surface of water. The previously blank space between the pillars turned crimson and wavy when touched. The clone's head, the first part of him through, was unaffected by the waves, but his fate was sealed as his metal equipment followed. The space between the stone pillars burst into action. Tiny lightning shards attacked the metal in the clone's grasp. His assault rifle and handguns, his grenades, the belt buckle and hunting knives, and the fronts of his steel-capped boots. But at that moment, Oliver Roth could only watch at regular viewing speed. To him, the dozens of explosions seemed instantaneous, as every metallic item around the clone's body was detonated by the red barrier. The shrapnel from the firearms and blades ripped through his limbs, sending his extremities across the room and his artificial blood splattering across the chamber floor. His right hand slapped against the bullet-resistant glass in front of Ian Marshall, causing hysterical laughter from Roth. As the clone's torn remains fell to the ground, nothing more than visceral chunks of carved meat, the rippling red curtain faded back into invisibility as if nothing had happened. Bloody hell, thought Roth, grudgingly impressed. As much as he despised Nathaniel Pierce, the chief scientist had surpassed himself this time. Atmospheric metallurgic excitation had once been a crackpot idea from the depths of Nicholas Grant's imagination, but somehow Nathaniel Pierce had brought it into the realm of reality, an invisible wall of energised air that destroyed anything forged from metal. "Sir," Pierce asked into the phone, "are you happy?" Nicholas Grant's discreet laughter answered the question for him. As Roth started to bounce on his toes with an excited smile, he looked to his side and found even Marshall smiling. Pierce rested his smart-ass mug at the edge of the control panel and began to applaud himself. "Happy is one word for it, certainly," Grant said. "Nat, can you confirm that AME can be reproduced on a much larger scale?" "Everything we understand about the laws of physics tells me it is now possible," Pierce replied. "If it works for a square metre, it'll work for a square mile. And if it works for a square mile, and are we still on target to achieve this within 4 days?" Grant's attachment to May the 20th continues to make his decisions for him, Roth thought to himself. "Yes," finished Pierce. "It'll be done within 4 days. Happy anniversary, sir." May the 20th, for those who can't remember in really, really fine detail, May the 20th is the anniversary of Takeover Day. And that is basically the plot for Underdogs 2. That Nathaniel Pierce has developed a shield that detonates anything made from metal, and it's very strongly implied there that they're going to use it to cover the whole of New London so that no one could possibly beat them. No invading army could invade without their guns blowing up or the fillings in the back of their teeth blowing up or basically anything made of metal, except for, just be really technical, the really, really small bits, like bits of iron in your blood, it's fine. But if it's anything sizable made of metal, like millimetre or bigger, then you're stuffed. Anyway, that is the end of Underdogs 1 and the prologue to Underdogs 2. I believe the pinned comment is still where you can pre-order the second one. And no promises, but I'm told that an audiobook will eventually happen for the second, but the only contact I've had about that is when they were making the first one, they said, "Oh yeah, tell us about the sequel as well." So I hope it'll come, but well, in the meantime, if you want a physical copy, or even if you just want a digital version, just go to that site and see if any of the rewards appeal to you. Anyway, by Debbie's request, I'm going to solve this cube before the end. I'm going to use this timer as well, just so I can see how long it takes. So, ready, go. Whoops. No way did I get that wrong. I never get this wrong unless I'm in front of a live audience. Cool. Let's do it again. It is a very interesting... Oh, thank you, Paul. It's a very interesting phenomenon where when I'm doing this on my own, I average around 30 seconds and my record is 19 seconds. When other people are looking, no, even if it's a live video. But just for the sake of revenge, I'm going to do this again. So let's go. There you go, 30.8 seconds. Liz says, I somehow missed every one of your readings except this for the next book. I'll be listening to all of them now and sharing with my Spectrum daughter. Thank you for making your book available here for this. Ah, thank you. You're more than welcome. And yeah, apologies on Facebook's behalf that, yeah, you're not the first person who's completely missed all of these videos and all of the announcements on them. There was one for, I think it was yesterday or the day before, who's actually a personal contact of mine on Facebook as well, who had actually no idea that these videos were happening, simply because Facebook hadn't told her. Sal says, you're good. Thank you very much. Took me 2 attempts to get it right, but then again, in all fairness, other people were watching. Other things that they're like doing a 5x5x5 Rubik's Cube. Like this one. And the they call it the Megaminx, which is otherwise known as the Rubik's dodecahedron. And Cassandra's just bought an Audible copy of Underdogs. Thank you very much, and I hope you like it. And I hope you enjoy Mike Paul's voice as well, because, well, it's very interesting hearing my characters actually having a voice that's not mine, particularly with the accents he gives them as well. And to his credit, he does not stumble over half his sentences like I do. We get a demo, a slow... do you mean a demo of... Oh, do you mean of this? Because... yeah, just to reiterate, tomorrow being the 5th anniversary of Autism Not Weird, I am planning to celebrate by having a Rubik's Cube tutorial session where I'll basically teach you how to solve a Rubik's Cube. In the meantime, I think I better finish this now. And once again, thank you to everyone who left encouraging comments and to people who tuned in and kept encouraging me that this was for something, and people really did appreciate this. And yeah, when the sequel comes out, I hope you love it just as much. Because I've got to admit, this is one of those rare occasions where I actually do prefer the sequel to the original. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow where I'll teach you how to do a Rubik's Cube. Take care. Bye. Oh, what time? Yeah, good question. I'm going to keep it simple and say 6 PM. Take care.